Hello and welcome everybody to the Energy and Sustainability Community of Interest webinar. I know it's been a while since we had a webinar, but I think we're coming in hot with a great presentation today on the hydrogen economy. I think you're really going to find the presentation thought-provoking and interesting. I'd say the bottom line today is probably, are we doing it wrong? I'll just kind of leave it out there, and you'll see as Dan gives his presentation, it's kind of the discussion of what he sees in the hydrogen economy. My short bio, my name is Matt McCann. I work for AECOM. I'm a retired Navy Civil Engineer Corps officer. I had a heavy focus in facilities management and energy efficiency management when I was active, and I joined AECOM when I retired about 6 years ago. Currently the federal energy market sector lead. Let's see, let's get some of the administrative stuff out of the way. You can see here, if you're trying to connect through a VPN, you might want to, and having difficulties, you might want to shift over. If you're having trouble with audio, you probably can't hear me anyway, but hopefully you see the instructions to troubleshoot there on the slide. If you do have questions, please post them in the Q&A tab off to the right, and not the chat tab. The Q&A tab is where we'll be able to kind of see questions, and has a mechanism to upvote in there. So if you put your questions in there, and people upvote them, I'll make sure to get to those questions at the end. Of course, we're recording here as always. Started recording as soon as we started. You can download the presentation and a couple other documents that the presenters wanted to be available over there on the right as well. So the short update on SAME and where we are with the community of interest. We're always looking for volunteers. I'd say we kind of have a small core group that juggles all the requirements of running the steering committee. If you're interested at all, even if you don't know what you want to do or don't have much time to commit to it, please reach out to Michelle. We're always looking for folks to help out. Upcoming webinars, you can see the kind of teaser there for the February one. I really wanted to get a good kind of scare tactic thing at the beginning. I think we have a really interesting year of webinars set up. Really focused on some of these topics that really align with the administration's priorities and goals, including those laid out in the Executive Order 14057 released in December. So we're going to have decarbonization planning. We're going to have infrastructure bill impacts. We're going to talk about vehicle electrification, advanced water conservation, carbon capture technologies, and some others. And I think that February one will be another really interesting kind of barn burner conversation with some of the folks from NASA's Goddard Institute for Space Studies. Climate scientists are gonna present that, so that should be really interesting as well. A couple other things: Capitol Week coming up in March in Rockville, Maryland, and then JETSI, of course, the big SAME event in Colorado in May. You can see the links if you download the presentation. You can see the links there for Capitol Week, for JETSI, and for the call for presentations for JETSI, which are still out. They're not due until Monday. So if you have a good idea and are interested in being on the podium at JETSI, please submit a paper. It's pretty straightforward and short. One last piece of administrative items. We like to do this poll. Just so we get an idea of who is on the call. Gives good perspective for our speakers as well. So you should see those poll results if you answer quickly to give an idea of who's on the call. While that's going on, I will start giving some perspective on what to expect here. So we have two speakers. Actually, we may have one speaker. I don't know if Jim is on as well, but I will intro Jim for if he's able to join us after all to give his portion of the presentation. Jim Dickmeyer is the CEO of Electrum Power and Technology, veteran-owned startup hydrogen integration company. They really believe that hydrogen must replace fossil fuels as the driver of the economy, and that's the way they're running their business. He's previously held account executive positions at Data Strategy and EMC, and owned Parametric Technology Corporation for 16 years. And he has a BS in marketing, sales management and marketing from Ball State University. He's going to give an overview of some of the challenges and solutions in the hydrogen space, if he's available. And next will be Dan Goen, the Corporate Technology Officer. He's the founder and primary developer of a few innovations at Electrum, the hydrogen valve, hydrogen safety valve, hydrogen check valve, and hydrodynamic compressor. He's primarily responsible for Electrum production systems. He describes himself as a serial entrepreneur and advanced technology developer. And a couple tidbits here. He was involved in the ARPANET program, the start of the internet, and he's designed the systems that control the distribution grid for 26 states. Pretty impressive resume for Dan. He's going to talk about some of the details of his vision for how the hydrogen economy should work. Jim, were you able to ultimately join us? No. Dan, I think you were going to take a shot at covering some of what Jim was going to cover.
Yeah, I think I'll have to try to do that. So anyway, so Jim Jackmart is the CEO of the company. I'm just simply the chief technology officer. So anyway, so it's an early startup company. Our concerns are preservation of our technology discoveries as an integrator and inventor. So intellectual property protection is kind of paramount for what we do. Especially with the things we work with the Department of Defense and the Department of Energy with. We talked about one of the things, the minimum investment needed is $20 million for one of these industrial parks that we're going to go ahead and we're going to talk about. We're working with the Department of Energy on a regular basis. Usually I'm down in the weeds with the guys over at the Department of Energy, especially the nuclear power area. And that goes back to, I have a utility background, especially when it comes to building independent systems IOs. And what the gentleman there just talked to you about before, I'm the guy that designed the computer system that controls the power grid for 26 states and parts of Canada. And of course, I came out of Indianapolis Power Light and some other different places it's after I got out of the Navy's labs. Hydrogen, as you know, is the smallest of known atoms, but has a tremendous amount of energy. NASA's been using hydrogen for years. But why hasn't the rest of the industry? Is actually hydrogen is easier and more efficient to use. But I ask myself, what is taking it so long? The challenges. Are we technology challenged? Are we motivated due to global warming? Is cost a factor? Is H2 dollar capital costs? Is it operating costs? Is it storage pipelines? And the answer is above all yes. But lack of technology and new discoveries, embrittlement destroys large expensive compressors. Compressors cannot use for generally most of the compressors used for compressing hydrogen cannot be lubricated, so you end up in a situation where you burn these devices. The downtime is very expensive, usually about 90 days to refurbish. High pressure compressors, today's $10 million, especially today's 10,000 psi or 700 bar compressors, and of course there's the Electrum high dynamic compressor, which is 50,000 bar or 347,000 bar. I think that's what Jim's got here. The benefits: greater pressures, more production, and we'll go into all the different issues. Now, one of the papers that's on the presentations, there's a paper there called "Hydrogen Compressors: A Match Not Made in Heaven." It's a paper written by Dr. Johnson and myself, and that paper, you read through, it's about a 2-pager. It's not very complex. And we also include some photos of some industrial-sized compressors. And if you read through that compressor, it'll tell you why those mechanical devices are really inappropriate for hydrogen on a lot of different levels. And that'll answer a lot of the questions. And then we'll lead into the talk. So basically, the things I was involved in is how to solve valve leakage. In other words, how to design and build valves that are molecularly tight at the quantum level, how to appropriately store the hydrogen, and I'll give you some examples of current industry practices where there's actually an industry out there that's been storing hydrogen underground for more than 50 years. What industries will be the early adopters? And I know Jim's gone extensively on that. And we're going to start out with the power grid, the utility, the public utilities, and the power grid. And I know Jim talks about the charging infrastructure for the electric cars and those type of issues. And we'll also talk about when the wind doesn't blow and the sun doesn't shine, those type of issues. I'll talk about curtail power, and like I said, I'll go into really what is required to store hydrogen when you're talking about large quantities of hydrogen. I'm talking about tens of thousands of metric tons of hydrogen, and we'll go into that. I think Jim also talks about the steel industry, and the other one is the fertilizer industry. Okay, so I've gone through that. So I've got, where's my first slide, please? Okay, so that there's just a graphic kind of depicting a core system. So what we're going to do is I'm going to go through and talk about those pieces. The four core pieces that you see right there, there's the electrolysis, there's the gas wellheads, the electrum hydrogen compressor, and a GE gas turbine. And those four components would be a core piece that you would put inside of an industrial park. And I'm going to step through this piece by piece, and then at the end, I'm going to put all the pieces together. And then we'll talk about what is this really going to cost. And most people will be rather shocked if you approach this from a grid scale perspective, how inexpensive this is. And you're also going to be more surprised by how much energy is actually available and wasted currently. And it's starting to become very obscene what's occurring. So I can get the next slide, please. Okay. So I'm going to take a turn here. Most of you probably be rather surprised. And that there is the center of the petroleum business. So what you've got there, that is the Whiting Refinery. That's up in eastern side of Chicago, next to Gary, Indiana. It's on the south side of Lake Michigan, not far from Chicago. So Standard Oil built that in 1890, and mainly what they were tapping into was it was an oil field. It's basically the state of Michigan. The state of Michigan sits on a salt deposit, and oil and gas tends to collect underneath salt. Rock salt, especially under pressure, tends to be plastic and is impervious to hydrogen. So that's actually one of the places where you can actually store hydrogen is under a salt deposit, deep underground, geological storage. Now, the thing about it is today, the state of Michigan has 36,000 depleted oil and gas wells. So what happened to that refinery there, once they depleted that oil and gas field there in the state of Michigan, they ended up becoming dependent on oil being transported by oil tanker across the Great Lakes. And that's Canada. You go down to Niagara Falls, a set of locks there that get you out to St. Louis Causeway, the Atlantic Ocean, the Gulf of Mexico, Nigeria, and the Middle East. Okay, now there's some things about that business, some good things about it and some not so good things about it. Here are the not so good things about it. Number one is you have to consider the transportation costs. So they transport crude oil from an oil field to this refinery. They're using truck, train, pipe, or ship to do that. So they're expending energy and cost to do that. Then at the refinery, either they're burning some of that crude oil or they use flare gases and or natural gas to burn it in a gas turbine to generate power at the refinery for refining crude oil. And then once they have it refined into product, right, then they have to ship it to the customer. And again, that's truck, train, pipe, or ship. So you have to realize how inefficient this business is. And quite literally today, what is killing the fossil fuel business is the cost of transportation, because none of that adds to the cost of actually producing that product you see at the pump. That's all just lost cost. And the longer that supply chain is around the other side of the planet, the higher those costs go. And especially we're working into an era where the good, cheap, the good, sweet, sour crude has already been consumed. And what we have left is sour crude. And I'll step through this. What we have to do is sour crude to turn that into useful fuel. So here are the positive things about the oil refinery. Okay, so on site in an oil refinery, there's always at least 3 wells at an oil refinery, always 3. There's one well they used to usually store propane. They store propane underground because it's the safest and most inexpensive way of storing propane is actually underground. The next one's ethylene, and the third one is hydrogen. Now, the hydrogen in the refinery, what they use it for is removing sulfur from the crude oil. So as you have crude oils that are heavier in sulfur content, this refinery would consume more and more natural gas, flare gas, and then more and more natural gas to produce blue hydrogen, right, to remove sulfur from the crude oil. So here's a business that's an expert in hydrogen, actually, and they store their hydrogen underground because it's the most economical and the safest way to store it. And when we talk into the volumetrics of hydrogen, you'll understand why they use underground storage at an oil refinery. All oil refineries have a hydrogen well. All of them do, right? Some way, shape, or form, there's one there. And the reason why is because that's where they store the hydrogen, because they have to use it for processing the crude oil. Now, case in point, give you an idea. 1 kilogram of hydrogen occupies 1 kilogram of hydrogen at room pressure, 1 bar pressure, to make it simple, will occupy 12,000 liters of volume. Now, if you ask why that's occurring, well, it has to do with the fact that the hydrogen molecule is positively charged and the molecules repel each other. That's why hydrogen occupies so much volumetric space. So if you want to know what the business I'm in the business of squeezing all the empty space out of hydrogen. Okay. So the aspect of this is simply this. Whenever hydrogen expands to that point, it won't burn. So in order to make hydrogen useful, it has to be compressed. And that's where you get into the issues, and it especially gets into that paper that all of you are hopefully reading right now called Hydrogen Compressors, a Match Not Made in Heaven. And you'll figure out the large industrial compressors at these oil refineries are very, not only are they inefficient, but they're inappropriate. Those large industrial compressors have to be rebuilt every 2 years, quite literally, because the hydrogen destroys them. It destroys them at the atomic level, and that has to do with embrittlement. Now, even if you're able to build your compressor out of those metallic alloys that are impervious to hydrogen, you'll still have to replace valves and seals in your compressor, and especially if you're running a compressor dry for hydrogen, right? Because you'll have to run it without lubricating oil, because if you use lubricating oil, it contaminates the hydrogen, and that might contaminate your other process. Now, some of the processes at the refinery can tolerate that, other processes cannot. So the processes where you're running a compressor dry, you've got quite literally a compressor there basically burning itself, running dry, compressing hydrogen. And that leads into why you have to rebuild these devices, these very expensive $10 million compressors about every 2 years. And it has to do with that. Those technical issues. So anyway, next page, please. Okay. So what that is, that's down in southern Indiana. That's Petersburg, Indiana, between Petersburg and Evansville, down in southern Indiana. That is an oil and gas field down there. There are actually oil wells down there. There's a lot of depleted wells. That's what all those kind of gray purple dots are. It's also a place where we store gases underground. So the utility business, whether your local gas utility, right, the oil and gas business, they store a lot of industrial gases underground in those wells. So, for example, if you go to a public utility and say, where are you guys storing your natural gas? They store it in the natural gas well. So, for example, these days here in Indiana, we have a gas grid throughout the United States. I'm sorry I didn't include that graphic. This thing's already busy enough as it is. But we bump natural gas up from Texas and store that gas underground locally here in Indiana. Now, that's where generally a lot of it gets stored there. We have another gas field up there called the Shelbyville gas field. Now, the unfortunate truth about this is, and I can show you, this is from the Indiana Department of Natural Resources, by the way, is I have studies of, most of the gas fields here, oil and gas fields here in Indiana. And what you're going to find out is probably about 80% of those fields are depleted. The Shelbyville gas field is 90% depleted. So there's lots of places where you can store gases like natural gas, nitrogen, carbon dioxide, et cetera, including hydrogen, right? And we're not using it. So there's a lot of capacity out there for safely storing these gases underground. It's called the geological storage of hydrogen. And there's actually been quite a bit, like I said, the oil and gas business, the oil refinery, that's a prime example where they store hydrogen, is they store it underground. Can I get to the next slide, please? Okay. So what that is from, that's from an oil driller's safety program. So to be a wildcatter, to be a driller that drills for oil and gas, you have to be licensed to run a rig. And the reasons why are simply there. When they drill down through what's called caprock above an oil and gas deposit and they pierce it, it's not unusual for the pressures to be, well, here in Indiana, I can tell you right now, it's 20,000 PSI. So when that happened, that causes what's called a kick. And the foreman on the drill rig, he'll hit a big red button that activates what's called the blowout preventer. What it does, it clamps around the drill string, the drill pipe, and holds the mud in the well so he can safely release the pressure. If he doesn't do that, you get a blowout, which could lead to a wildfire, and then you got to call in John Wayne to put out this blowtorch coming out of the ground about 100 yards. So this is how you prevent an accident from happening. But you can notice right there it says 20,000 psi. So, for example, up in Canada, it's not unusual, especially you're drilling for natural gas, and usually natural gas up there is about 10,000 feet. It's not unusual for those to come in at about 30,000 psi. So you can store gases underground, especially hydrogen, because the caprock is impervious to hydrogen, and you can store it at these extremely high pressures. And most people are actually rather surprised that's even possible. The limiting factor, believe it or not, is actually the compressor technology. The industrial reciprocating compressors that are being used today, if you're compressing natural gas or carbon dioxide or any of those other gases, you can get them up to 69,000 psi, right? But if you take that same device and you put hydrogen in it, you'll be lucky to get it above 300 bar, which is 2,900 psi, and it has to do with the fact you're dealing with the smallest molecule in nature. When you read through that paper, hydrogen compressors, it'll step you through the whole thing. The basic story about that is simply this: you're trying to build a wall of bowling balls to hold back sand. I'll say that again. You're trying to build a wall of bowling balls to hold back sand. Now, imagine you're at a beach and you're trying to build a retaining wall out of bowling balls. Okay. Now, those, I don't care how you're hooking bowling balls together, however you do that, right? And you're just shoveling sand behind to make a retaining wall. You'll quickly figure out that's not going to work very well. Well, what's happening at the quantum level? Those bowling balls, those are the iron atoms, right? And the sand, those are the hydrogen atoms. That's the difference here. That's what you're dealing with at the quantum level. When you're talking about a reciprocating compressor, you've got a piston, you've got a compression ring, and the cylinder wall. Well, the gap between the piston and the cylinder wall to the hydrogen atom is basically the Grand Canyon. And the compression ring that you have around that piston, well, the hydrogen atom is so small, it'll fit between the compression ring and the cylinder wall. And when that piston's moving really quickly, you get this called the Bernoulli effect. It's also called the Venturi effect. And what happens is, by that piston moving back and forth really fast, it'll funnel tremendous amounts of hydrogen right past your compression ring. So if you've got that problem with the space between your cylinder wall and your compression rings, then you're going to have that problem with your input valve and output valves, because you'll never be able to grind those surfaces smooth enough to keep them sealed from the hydrogen molecule, because it is that tiny. So if you're going to build a compressor, compressing it, check valves, those type, check valve in, check valve out, compressing the gas, you've got to think at things at the level, at that quantum level. So one is the size of the molecule, and the other one is, I talked about the hydrogen being positively charged and all the space between those molecules, right? That you're going to have to deal with. So you have all the volumetrics you got to deal with. If I can, let's see here. What else did I have to? Okay. If I can get you to the next slide, please. Okay. So that is from the Department of Energy. Now, the Department of Energy has done a great job over there of documented this. This is there's a paper that they have called the Geological Storage of Hydrogen. And if anybody wants to see that, I'm sure we can make it available. But basically, their map shows you those are places where we're currently storing hydrogen underground. Those are places where we stored hydrogen underground in the past. And there's places where we know we can convert over to hydrogen storage. And not only that, but there are two different types of places where we know we can build synthetic hydrogen repositories. Okay. The first place is there are a number of all the different salt domes and salt deposits around the country. For example, down in the tip of Florida there, down around the Tampa Bay area there in Florida, there's a salt dome there. And one of the things my pet I'd love to do type projects is to drill down underneath that rock salt, horizontally drill it and frack the rock and make a synthetic hydrogen repository. And I'm fairly certain that'll work, mainly because I know that rock salt under pressure is plastic and it's impervious to hydrogen. The other places are those sedimentary areas. Now, there's a type of limestone called dolomite. And when dolomite, especially when it's saturated with rock salt, because it has to do with salt water, it becomes impervious to hydrogen. Now, it is possible to drill down 10,000 feet and across to horizontally drill and fracture the rock to form a hydrogen repository. It's just that those geological structures aren't nearly as resilient as the rock salt. Okay. Now, what I'm trying to tell you now, if you're talking about horizontally drilling and fracking one of these, you're probably talking about $10 million a well. So that, especially in those sedimentary areas, that may not work. And the reason why it has to do with the plasticity of the rock. I know it works with salt because it has to do with the plasticity of the rock salt. But those dolomite areas, it's hard to say. But the point I'm trying to say is you can make an investment here, and it might not, return dividends. It may return dividends, and may not. Right. So that's something you got to keep in mind whenever you're trying to do something like this. Now, there are a couple places outside the United States where this might be appropriate. Of course, we'd have to do some studies. And I've got some great research scientists up at Purdue's Geological Department done a lot of work on this, right? For example, the Sea of Japan might be a good location for some kind of hydrogen repository, and probably the west side of Guam. But I don't know. That's just an area outside the United States we probably have to do a lot more research on. So if I can get the next slide, please. So one of the aspects of that gives you an idea how large these especially these natural gas wells, how large these wells are. It's not a small thing. So one of the aspects of doing this is, first of all, the material you see right there is not necessarily appropriate for hydrogen. So we'd have to use one of those appropriate materials for hydrogen. Luckily, the oil and gas business actually have some of this, and it's mainly using something called 316 stainless steel. It just so happens that the oil and gas people, there's a type of well, it's called a hydrogen sulfide well. It's a poison gas well. But hydrogen sulfide tends to be very corrosive. So the oil and gas people actually have a pipe and valves and Christmas trees, specific that work great with hydrogen. So you'd have to have the drill. You'll have to have it re-drilled. For example, just a straight natural gas well, you have to have it re-drilled. Stainless steel pipe, stainless steel wellhead, and a stainless steel Christmas tree. That's the thing sitting on top. They call it the Christmas tree. So when you're talking just re-drilling the well, you're usually talking $2 to $4 million. I'm talking about an existing natural gas well, just taking advantage of the geological structures that we already know are there because we've depleted a lot of those wells already. Now, as far as the average amount of storage that one of these wells will hold, the average is about 6.5 million cubic meters of storage. Now, if you ask why do we know this, well, understand from the day that well was put into production until it went dry, the gas was metered coming out of there because your state government was making tax money off of it. The geological owner, they made money from it. So we're measuring what's coming out of this thing, and based on from the time it was drilled to the time it went dry, we know exactly what came out of this thing, and from that we can calculate, hey, how much storage will this thing hold? Okay, and of course we also know, when we first drilled this, what was the beginning pressure at? So that also gives us an idea what's the top end of the pressure curve and how much gas can we store in one of these things. Okay. There's another note too, just so everybody understands this. So I'm out of the public utility sector, so one of the things I know are happen to be gas turbines. When you're looking especially at the amount of gas that it takes to fire up a gas turbine, understand, like if you're talking about like a GE9HA, and that's a gas turbine that generates 457 megawatts worth of power per hour. That gas turbine weighs 400 tons, is as heavy as a 747. So I'll give you an idea of scale. But the gas source for that giant gas turbine is actually one of these gas wells, right? So understand there isn't a big storage tank out behind the building providing gas to that giant gas turbine. What's feeding the gas turbine is one of these wells, and that's where that gas is coming from, is one of these wells. It's the only thing large enough that you can scale large enough to feed something like that. If I can get you to go to the next slide, please. Okay. So right there, that is a depiction of a grid scale electrolyzer. That's one of the electrolyzers out of ITM Power that's out of Europe. Some of my friends are telling me that ITM Power right now is pretty much sold out of these units until 2026. Luckily here in the United States, but I'm more familiar with, there's a company called Millennium Rain Energy, and that's Chris McWhitney's company. Chris is over here in Dayton. I live in Indy. But anyway, a Millennium Rain Energy, a megawatt grid scale electrolyzer will consume 1 megawatt hour. For 1 megawatt hour of power will generate 22 kilograms of hydrogen at 20 bar. And at 20 bar pressure, that hydrogen will occupy 13,200 liters of volume. That's per hour. Now, when I show you how inexpensively you can buy power off the markets, off the power grid, right, you're going to quickly realize, well, my problem isn't generating the hydrogen, but even at 20 bar, 13,200 liters of volume, your problem is going to be a storage problem. Where do you store that much gas? You're going to find out you're going to have a hard time finding storage containers that large for storing that gas. And the only economical place you're going to be able to store that gas is going to be in one of those depleted wells that I just showed. Okay. So if I now, as far as life cycle goes, I want to make sure I get this in there. So the mean time to failure rate from for a megawatt grid scale electrolyzer, and that's a electrolyzer that fits inside of a 40-foot cargo container. So that'll give you an idea of scale and deployability and so forth. The life cycle target is 90,000 hours mean time to fuel failure, and that's once every 10 years. And the reason why we package electrolyzers in this format has to do with, well, first of all, you can put that in the back end of a semi truck, deliver it to site, de-energize, shut down the old electrolyzer, put it in the back of a truck, take the new electrolyzer off the truck, put it on the ground, hook it back up, energize it, and you can do that in hours, if not days. So it makes it easy, convenient to be able to deploy this type of equipment. And that actually, a 40-foot cargo container is the perfect format for an electrolyzer. That way, you don't have to put this device in a custom build or anything. You just put it out there in a concrete pad. And treat it like a service, like a public utility. If I can get you to go to the next slide, please. Okay. And there, I'm just going to show you that that power supply there is a prototype, and then you've got that tank right there. So since I don't use mechanical compression, I usually use quantum physics, supercritical fluids, and hydrodynamics to compress the gas. Okay, so that container you see right there, that is a 3,000 liter. It's an ASME certified pressure vessel. It's actually certified to 5,100 bar. That's 73,000 psi. If you didn't know that, it has a stainless steel liner. Now, since I use quantum physics, supercritical fluids, and the hydrodynamics of fluids to compress the gas. So, for example, I've got an equation there. It's a very simple equation. That is watts times the pressure in bars times that device has a displacement of 60 liters per minute times 60 minutes. And that'll tell you how many watts that device will compress that, how many watts it'll take to compress that gas to 1,000 bar per hour. Now, that container, 3,000 liters of hydrogen, that's 5 kilograms of hydrogen at 20 bar occupies 3,000 liters. Now, the reason why I chose 1,000 bar, just make it easy math. So that device has the ability to compress hydrogen from, like I said, 5 kilograms of material, 20 bar, which occupies 3,000 liters. It'll compress it down to 5 kilograms of hydrogen at 1,000 bar, occupying 3 liters, right? So when you're compressing hydrogen, you have to understand these volumetrics of what you're really trying to do. Now, 1,000 bar is 15,000 psi. That's a lot higher than the 700 bar that's needed, for example, like the Toyota Mirai car and some of the hydrogen fuel cell stuff out there. But 15,000 psi, 1,000 bar, 15,000 psi is definitely below the maximum amount of pressure that one of these depleted oil and gas wells is able to withstand. Because remember what I said, it's not unusual for these things to come in at 20,000 psi, and if you're up in Canada, these things come in at 30,000 psi. So those geological structures can withstand a lot of high pressure. And if you're asking why is it even capable of doing that? Well, you have to remember that these deposits are 7 to 10,000 feet down. You have millions of tons of rock on top of it. If you got strata layers of rock that's impervious to hydrogen, it's an interesting way of storing the gas, but it's going to be the most economical way of storing the gas, especially since you've just got this structure sitting down right underneath you. The other aspect of this technology is agnostic to a wet gas. Now, that's very important because most of the compressors out there, especially if you're running a compressor dry, you can't tolerate water in that hydrogen gas. You're running it dry. So almost all the Lind and Hoffer compressors rely upon there being a dry gas. They can't tolerate wet gases. And to make matters worse, they end up running those devices dry. And because there's no lubrication, these compressors literally burn themselves. So if you're at a hydrogen fuel station in California, you're wondering, why can't I fill up my car? Well, what's going on in the background is there's a compressor out there burning itself up, trying to compress hydrogen to 700 bar. And it's mainly because you're running against the physics. You're not using the physics, the quantum physics, to your advantage. Well, this device was designed to do it. Now, the maximum amount of pressure that device was actually designed for is 4,100 bar. The highest I've ever gotten it up to was 57,860 psi. That was June of last year. I blew a coupling out, so right now I'm kind of in search of a master machinist to fix on that coupling. But that's just using that device right there. Can I get you to go to the next slide, please? Now, if we're going to do to scale for industrial scale compression of hydrogen, The tank I would actually need to use is that thing right there in the back end of that semi truck, that trailer right there. What that is that's the container for a cat cracker. It's a 15,000 liter tank. It's ASME certified to 5100 bar, 73,000 psi. It has a stainless steel liner that is used in an oil refinery to catalytically crack crude oil into diesel and gasoline. And oh, by the way, they run hydrogen through that thing to react with the sulfur to remove sulfur from the final product. Right. So there's a piece of equipment that already does what I need right there. And these devices, if you're talking about mean time to failure, they're designed to last from 20 to 30 years. So it's a pretty tough piece of metal that already exists. Now, the numbers I've got right there, I've got their liters per minute, 250 liters per minute. I have not built a single stage power supply that'll actually do a displacement of 250 liters per minute. Just make sure you understand that. But that's not generally an obstacle for what we need it for. And I'll describe that on the next slide. And you can see right there, I mean, even if I built a machine, so 250 liters per minute displacement times 60 minutes is 15,000 liters. So you could compress, 15,000 liters of hydrogen. I think that's about 23 kilograms of hydrogen at 20 bar occupies 15,000 liters of volume. Compressing it to 1,000 bar would only require 576,000 watts of energy. So you would have to consume 1 megawatt of energy producing the hydrogen and consume 576,000 watts of energy compressing it. So you can roughly say it only takes 1.6 megawatts of power to produce 22 kilograms of hydrogen and then compress it down to 1,000 bar, 1.6 watts, per hour. Can I go to the next slide, please? Okay, and there's just simply a model that I built. And basically, the idea there is you use two of those 15,000 liter ASME certified tanks, and for my prototype power supplies, that's 60 liters per minute displacement times 4 is 240 liters of displacement, which per hour works out to something like, I think that's 14,000 liters per hour. So the point being is just using my prototype, if you built 4 of those and those 2 tanks, and the idea you would basically what you use 2 of those Millennium Range Megawatt grid scale electrolyzers, one electrolyzer matched up to each one of those tanks, right? You would be filling one tank up with gas and the other tank would be compressing hydrogen, and you'd flip states back and forth between those 2. But the point is that was a system between the electrolyzers and this equipment right here that would be able to produce 22 kilograms of hydrogen per hour and compress it to 1,000 bar per hour, right? And 22 kilograms of hydrogen, which works out to you could refill 4 Toyota cars per hour just by using this equipment. Of course, you can always, obviously scale this to be a lot larger than what it currently is. But this is just what we currently, have that we can do today. Can I go to the next page, please? Yeah, there we go. Okay, so one of my tenures after I built the system there at Mid-Continent ISO is I went to work there at General Electric, and I worked on their alternative fuels program, and that was burning hydrogen and gas turbines. So what's depicted there is a GE LM6000 that we tailored for burning hydrogen. So to give you a couple ideas here, first of all, the startup time on it's a 50 megawatt gas turbine. Is only about 5 minutes. Now you could tail that up to a GE 9HA. That's a 557 megawatt gas turbine. Now there's something called combined cycle, and what that is, I use the exhaust from this gas turbine to heat up a boiler. Basically, it's called a heat recovery unit. You can do single cycle or dual cycle, and what they call a combined cycle. First stage is where you heat up the steam and pump it into a high pressure steam turbine. Right, and then you can take that and run it, and that's single stage, combined cycle single stage, and then you can go to 2 stage, which it takes that high pressure steam, bleeds it into a low pressure turbine. The point is instead of it being a 50 megawatt gas turbine, if you're willing to wait to heat up that boiler, in 24 hours you could be producing 150 megawatts worth of power coming out of this device. If you're asking how much hydrogen this device burns per hour, it burns 5,000 kilograms of hydrogen per hour. And if you're asking for how much natural gas that is, 5,000 kilograms of hydrogen, that works out to a little over 10,000 kilograms of natural gas per hour. So 5,000 kilograms of hydrogen is actually 5 metric tons of hydrogen. The big GE 9HA 557 megawatt gas turbine. That one burns 40,200 kilograms of hydrogen per hour. If you're doing natural gas, it's over 100,000 kilograms per hour. But at hydrogen, 40,200 kilograms of hydrogen per hour, that works out to 4 metric tons of hydrogen. Now, even though that seems like an insurmountable, how is that even possible? Where the heck are you going to store that much gas? So forth. I'll show you how that's possible. So this is not quite a daunting thing. Now, it is important to know that on a GE9HA, like I said, you can start that up within 30 minutes, 567 megawatts worth of power coming directly off that gas turbine. If you take the exhaust of that and you lead it into a heat recovery unit to heat up a boiler, right, and you do two stage, right, steam, 9HA, 557 megawatts worth of power, within 24 hours, you can have 1.6 gigawatts worth of power online producing electric power. Now, as far as I know, that's one of the few replacements for a nuclear-fired power plant. The other one is obviously a coal-fired power plant. So working for IPL, I worked on my share of coal-fired power plants. But the only other option is one of those giant 9HA GE gas turbines, right? And if you use, like I said, if you use combined cycle, 2-stage, that is a 1.6 gigawatt power source that can replace a nuclear-fired power plant, especially a 1.1. Usually, most of those power plants are 600 megawatts to 1.1 gigawatts worth of power. If I can get you to, yeah, pretty much that. So that describes that system right there, and that's your electrolyzers, the wellheads, the electrum hydrogen compressor, and the gas turbines. Now, down there, I've got a service station down there. You could, as an option, attach a service station using a utility pipeline to it. The only note to this, and one of the things I described is the fact the electrum hydrogen compressor, it's agnostic to a wet gas. So any gas you're getting out of electrolyzer, whether it's proton exchange membrane or alkali electrolysis, that's going to be a wet gas. If you're storing gas underground in a gas well, that'll be a wet gas, and sometimes it's contaminated with natural gas. Now, the reason why a gas turbine was chosen is not, well, it's not as efficient as a fuel cell, right? But again, especially the GE gas turbines, their efficiency is 50%, right? And they burn anything, versus a hydrogen fuel cell is a bit particular about what fuel it'll actually burn. Now, the positive thing with that service station down there, you'll have to use a membrane to filter the gas. Now, if you're starting out with a pressurized system, pressurized 1,000 bar, regulating the pressure down to 700 bar is easy enough, and you'll have to run it through membrane. And luckily enough, hydrogen is the smallest molecule in nature, so there's lots of materials that you use membranes to make sure that the giant water molecules and the giant natural gas molecules can't go through that membrane, and that way you've got pure 99.99% hydrogen going down to that service station, for which you can, semi trucks and cars and whatever else equipment that you need to power up off a hydrogen fuel cell. And even down to the point, if you put in a pipeline, you probably power a hospital or a military installation or whatever alternative ways, facilities you need for providing energy for. And if you look back through what we did when I talked about that natural gas well, but from a tactical standpoint, there are probably a lot of things you could do to protect that wellhead. And it's a relatively small market, especially if you look at some of the renewable energy sources that are at military bases today. You've got, wind turbines and solar farms, and think about this from a military perspective. Being a military guy, I'm like, those are all targets of opportunity. But trying to hit one of those wellheads, that might be challenging, especially if it's camouflage and or you put a bunker over or something like that. So there's a huge tactical advantages to putting together this kind of industrial park, because once that wellhead is pressurized with that hydrogen gas, right, even if you took out the electrolyzers, compressors, that equipment, that wellhead's still pressurized. So there's a variable storage media of energy that could be pressurized, stored with very valuable energy, meaning that hydrogen gas, that could be usable just by opening a valve. There's pressure there. There's an energy source you can tap into. Not only that, but since the hydrogen is stored deep underground, it makes it a pretty resilient, hard target to take out or even affect. Now, if I can get you to go to the next slide, please. Okay, so where did this idea come from? Well, originally it came from Indianapolis Power and Light. So if you look on that picture, that's a grid map, right? So it has high tension power lines, gas lines. It's a utility map, is what it is. So most of the public hasn't seen anything like that. So down, you've got a box down there. It's a green box around that red dot there. Okay, that's Petersburg. That's that Petersburg power plant I've been talking about. So originally they installed that power plant in 1967. They finished putting generating units in about 87. Each one of the units are about 600 megawatts. Now, what IPL did was they built a power plant right on top of a coal mine because they logically deduced correctly, I might add, that it's much easier to transport electrons rather than fuel. If you just think about the economics. So my lesson there is transport electrons, not fuel. When I talk back to the fossil fuel business, especially oil refineries, what's killing that business is the transportation costs. So when it comes to the hydrogen economy, what you probably want to do is how do I avoid transporting that fuel? If I can produce it, store it, and consume it locally, that would probably be a good thing. And probably try to avoid transporting this thing because a lot of your efficiency, a lot of your cost is going to be sunk just doing transporting. If you're transporting around a bottle of gas, or even if you have cryogenic fluids like liquid hydrogen that's at minus 200 some degrees Fahrenheit, you have to keep that refrigerated, and that's just cost sunk trying to transport hydrogen around. So if you're going to transport energy, the most efficient way of doing it is transporting it across the power grid. Okay, so now the other aspect I wanted to talk now on that picture there, you've also got some orange dots there. Those are some of the coal-fired power plants that I've converted over to natural gas to gas turbines. Okay, so, and if you want to know why that happened, and it's one of the tales I told the guys putting this conference together, what's taking out the coal-fired power plants is not the wind turbines, contrary to popular belief. What's really taking them out is really the coal. And the story there is very simple. Just an ancillary note, and that is simply there's basically three grades of coal. There's anthracite, there's bitumen, and there's lignite. The anthracite, that's an 80% or higher carbon content. That coal has been gone for 40 years. So it was a good coal. The good coal we used to get out of Pennsylvania. Today you got bitumen and you got lignite. The bitumen is 40 to 80% carbon content, and the next grade down from that is lignite. Lignite is 40% or less carbon content. Now, you got to remember this about these high ash content coals. If it's not carbon, it's ash. So in the case of lignite, remember what I said, it's 40% or less carbon content. It's brown coal. In the business, we call it burning dirt. Okay. So that's 60% ash. Well, if you're burning that kind of coal, you have to have a scrubber. And the reasons why are very simple. Because if you don't, you'll rain ash 300 miles around that power plant. Okay. Now, the downside of that scrubber is that scrubber will consume 50% of the energy coming out of your steam turbine. So think of what I said, 40% carbon content. Chop that in half. That means only 20% of the energy of a fuel that you're mining and transporting by the ton is made available for energy or power on the power grid. Okay. And I haven't even included grid losses on the power grid. Right. And if you want to know what drives that business, that drives it out of business, it's simply the price of diesel. And that is what do you put in that front loader? Diesel. What's in the dump truck? Diesel. What's on that locomotive train? Diesel. The price of diesel fuel will put a coal-fired power plant out of business. Okay. So that's what's going on with coal. That's really what's taking out the coal-fired. We're not actually replacing coal-fired power plants with gas turbines. The reason why we're putting gas turbines in those facilities is because we have a facility already there, and we're putting in gas turbines. We put those gas turbines in for peaking times and for times when we don't have other energy sources that are cheaper. We fill in the gaps with those gas turbines, but those gas turbines are not running all the time. Okay, and I'm going to go. So it goes back to the public has this misperception. The truth is, what's taking out these coal-fired power plants is really the coal, the quality of the coal, because the coal miners, they mine the good stuff first and leave the other stuff to later. Well, guess what? We're later. Okay, and you're going to find out this issue is true throughout the entire fossil fuel complex. Is that they, for example, the crude oil, they use the good sweet stuff to refine it first. The stuff that we have available now is some of that heavy sour stuff, and it costs more money to turn that into fuel. And slowly but surely, the economics are turning on the fossil fuel business. And you can look at the energy prices today, you have a good idea, and that is feeding into the inflation that we're seeing today. Next page, please. Okay, so what will it cost? Okay, give me a minute here. I'm going to go back and talk about some wind farms, and I'll show you how cheap this can be. So that there page, that's from NextEra Energy, and that's the largest public utility in the United States. And if you look down there, they've got some wind, they got solar, they got natural gas, gas turbine, coal-fired power plant, and nuclear power. You know, if you guys invite the CEO of Next Era onto your forum here and have him talk through it, he's going to tell you something shocking, right? And that is they're putting in wind farms and solar farms, and they're not environmentalists. They're not doing it for environmental reasons. They're doing it because the coal-fired power plants are putting themselves out of business, and it has to do with the quality of the coal. Now, the positive news about what I've shown you here is if you look real closely, there's a thing there called a storage adder. And what that storage adder is, that's when the wind's not blowing and the sun's not shining. And you would think that in the business, we call it a battery kicker, okay? But sometimes it's battery, you know, when the wind's not blowing, we fill in the gaps with battery, or we've got some coal out there or natural gas or some other place where we're filling in the power. Now, that usually works out to about $5 per megawatt hour. That's a megawatt hour power. So you see there, it says wind at $20. Now, I can tell you right now, Mid-Continent ISO, our average cost of electricity is actually $18 per megawatt hour. Now, the energy markets are broken into two parts. One's a spot market, the other one's a long-term market. And we have something called a PPA, that's a power purchase agreement. And those are contracts that are 15, 20, and 30 years out. So you can lock in your cost of electricity at $20 per megawatt hour. Okay, you could do that. Now, if you have something like an electrolyzer, that's a device that can be turned on and off. It's called dynamic load. You can even realize that much more cost. Now, since I built that system there in Mid-Continent ISO, how we control the power grid is we have our own internet. It's a dark fiber internet where we control all the elements out there in the power grid. And their elements, it's a smart grid concept. It's not really new. It's been around for been around for at least 20 years ever since I built that thing there at MISO. But what we do is we dynamically shed load. For example, today, there are certain types of steel manufacturers, and especially rolled aluminum manufacturers, and probably my big one has to do with concrete. So whenever there's too much load on the grid, we'll shed the guys that are making concrete, return their power off, right? And in return, they get, you know, inexpensive electricity for making cement and concrete. So, but the point is, if I don't need the battery kicker, for example, I could get a PPA for wind power that's only 15. That's only $15. So that's oh, Dan and I missed off. Okay, can I get you to go to the next page, please? Okay, and that there, I'm just showing you the wind power available throughout the United States. One quick note there, I'm going to talk about curtailed wind power. My friends down in ERCOT, down in southern Texas, they curtail 17 terawatts worth of wind every year, meaning as the wind's blowing, but we have no use for the power. Okay, so that's kind of a shocking thing when you find out the state of Texas that 17 trillion watts of electric power that's not being used. And let me put that in perspective. Can I get the next slide, please? Okay. So that's just here in the state of Indiana. So that red box with yellow in it, that's a town called Fowler, Indiana. That's a wind farm town. Okay. So from there northward, that's wind power country. To give you an idea, here in Indiana, we curtail 7 terawatts of wind every year. That's 7 trillion watts. Now, if you turn that into hydrogen, remember, that's 1 megawatt hour power, 22 kilograms of hydrogen, per hour. That converts into 154 million kilograms of hydrogen, which is, equal to 154,000 metric tons of hydrogen we could be producing and storing today. If you're refilling Toyota Mirai cars, right? You can refill your car 25,600,000 times on that. If you're refilling cars once a week, we could support a fleet of 493,589 cars per year simply on what we're throwing away. If you're talking about some of those GE gas turbines, remember what I said about an LM 6000 will burn 5 metric tons of hydrogen per hour. So 5 metric tons divided in 154,000 metric tons, you're going to get a number that leads you, tens of thousands of days worth of power if you just do simple math. And even the 9HA, I think I did the math on a 9HA burning through, it's 40 metric tons per hour of hydrogen, burning through 154,000 metric tons of hydrogen works out to like 160 days. So you could have that 9HA generating 1.6 gigawatts worth of power for 160 days. And hopefully, if that is a backup power source for your nuclear fire power plant, I would hope that you could get it back online within that 160 days. Okay. If I can get you to go to the next page, please. Okay. That there just goes down through a cost, and that's just a minimal installation. And 2 of the megawatt grid scale electrolyzers from Millennium Rain Energy, those are about $1.5 million each, so $3 million. The electrum hydrogen compressor, that's the manufacturing cost, is about $500,000 per unit. Redrilling a single well for hydrogen service using the stainless steel, those are about $4 million a piece. At GE LM6000, brand new from General Electric, that includes installation on site. Those are about $10 million a piece, and it usually takes about 12 months to do that, by the way. Miscellaneous costs, that's surveying the land, put up chain link fence and barbed wire, pouring concrete pads, adding service, possibly drilling a water well out there for those electrolyzers, so forth. So the point is, you're still under $20 million. Now, the thing about that system I just showed you, that is a scalable system. So on my recommendation is, like I said, the minimum system is just that middle scale GE gas turbine, that LM6000. And if you want to scale it up to something larger, you can, depending what your needs are. But the point is, that core system right there, you could, if you deployed that on military bases, or even, for example, per county across the United States, you could build a system where you could, if you need to, you would have instead of having these electrical generation facilities, they're point failures basically, because they're large, but they're point failures, very economical point failures. A single coal-fired power plant is a point of failure. But if you have these parks spread across, say, 20 or 30 counties, and using the existing infrastructure we have in place for controlling the power grid, you could dynamically ramp up generation and fill in those spaces that we have out there in the power grid. Now, the reason why I told you guys all the information about those coal-fired power plants, and it goes back to what I'm trying to tell you about the coal, is that what they fail to tell you about, supposing the United States has 300 years worth of coal, what they fail to tell you is a majority of that is that lignite. And the price of diesel fuel will put a lot of that out of business. So if you want to know why we're shutting down a lot of those coal-fired power plants, and we're going to be doing that all the way up to 2030, it's really because of the coal. And we're filling those gaps in with those gas turbines, right, burning natural gas, wind and solar and nuclear wherever we can, right, with that infrastructure. The sad part about this is, unfortunately, I mean, there's already there's already a utility base for natural gas. That's the retail customers out there. And we already have industrial customers, and we're adding gas turbines on top of that. So that's leading to higher natural gas prices. I think I was looking at the price of natural gas here in the United States. I think it's running about $4 per million BTUs. Thank goodness we don't live over in Japan right now. I was looking at the market for Korea and Japan right now. They're paying $30 per million BTUs of liquefied natural gas. $30 per million BTUs of liquefied natural gas. And Europe, there's a energy crisis going on in Europe right now, and they have the same problems. You're still talking $20, $30 per million BTUs of liquefied natural gas. So what I'm trying to tell you is the price of that natural gas, as we put more and more demands on it, those prices are going to go up. Now, later on, we can talk about where that break even is between hydrogen, electrolysis, and natural gas. And there's a break even where you get a BTU to BTU crossover there. But we can talk about that later. If I can, I think I've got, the last one. That's just questions you got.
Wow, there's a lot of information that Dan put out there. A lot of kind of numbers and technical approach, I think, on his vision for how the hydrogen piece could work. I know we're close to the top of the hour. From what I understand from Rob, though, we can go over. So if anybody's interested in staying on, we can have a bit of a Q&A here. I see one question in the Q&A, but I have a few queued up as well. So Rob, I'll just look to you to tell me if folks are dropping off and we don't have an audience anymore, because I don't think I can see that number. But David Link
we're
asked,
still good, Matt.
Okay, thanks, Rob. David Link asks, are the gas turbines flexible? Are they hydrogen or natural gas or a mix? Or is your scenario that you painted, is that just for hydrogen use on those?
Well,
turbines?
okay, so here's how I'm gonna. So when I worked for GE for the alternative fuels programs, here's what we had to do. So for hydrogen, I actually have to use burners that they're actually designed for the hydrogen. The other different, because you have to remember the volumetrics of hydrogen, and I have to replace a lot of the tubing for high pressure. To make hydrogen practical, it has to be compressed. So that means I've got to change out the fuel system, the fuel regulator, and the burners. Now, once I've done that, it's flex fuel. I mean, you could go from hydrogen, natural gas, and if you've got the proper type of heat preheater where you can vaporize crude oil, you can burn crude oil in the same device. Now, I'll tell you this right now, having done this, burning propane or crude oil in a gas turbine, once you light her up in hydrogen, it'll clean that gas turbine out quite quickly. There's another aspect of this too you have to remember. Whenever General Electric, whenever they install a gas turbine burning pure hydrogen, one of the things they're going to do is hydrogen, it burns really hot. Inside of a gas turbine, you're talking about 5,000 degrees. So it's a hot burner. It's a high energy fuel. Natural gas is about per pound is at 280, was at 20,000 BTUs per pound. Hydrogen is 51,000 BTUs per pound. That is a high energy fuel. Now, the simplest way, now the problem with this has to do with NOx, right? Nitrous oxide, right? Because those high temperatures. The easiest way how we deal with that is we actually spray water into the compressor. And so what happens whenever that water hits those burners, it cools the temperatures off. That's good. Okay, one. The second thing is that water expands by 1,000 times in the steam, and water's heavy. And when it hits those power turbines, it adds a lot of power right back to that thing. So you'll end up burning a lot less hydrogen. So the most efficient fuel in that gas turbine is actually the hydrogen. If you sit down and talk to the aerospace engineers that are designing those jet engines, what you're going to find out is their models, they modeled after burning hydrogen. That's the ideal gas. And the reason why is because the stochastic fuel to air mixture for hydrogen goes from 4% all the way up to 75%. Versus if you're using natural gas, the stochastic air mixture is right around 30%. It's actually harder to keep that gas turbine burning natural gas than it is to burn the hydrogen. So once you do this conversion, your gas turbine, it's very much flex fuel. But you have to remember that I got to swap out my burners and all the fuel lines because I got to use higher pressures because of all this volumetric issues that go along with hydrogen. I hope that answers your question.
Thanks, Dan. Ryo Nakamoto asks, what are the obstacles that are hindering conversion of the curtailed power to H2 right now? In other words, why aren't we doing it?
Okay, so here's how I'm gonna explain this. So I'm kind of in an advantageous position. I'll tell you why. Number one is I don't work for an ISO currently. I don't. Okay, and the reason why that's important is because the member utilities actually control and own an ISO. An ISO is a non-for-profit entity. Okay, and they operate the power grid on the back of the owners, the utilities. Now, there's no incentive to add generation to the grid, just so you understand. The only reason why we're even putting in wind power is because there's a tax break there. There's no incentive to add power onto the grid. There's all kinds of incentive to add more load, like recharging cars, right? And that gets you a situation where you have more demand than you have supply, which leads to, hey, I can improve my profit here. Okay, so that's one. The other is, especially here in the United States, our utilities are regulated monopolies. They're regulated at the state level. The person that really controls the public utility in your state is the governor of your state. So even if you're an Elon Musk, you could not do what I'm proposing. It's going to take a governor of a state to do this. Politics. So it's not engineering, right? It's not cost. It's not being wealthy enough. Not any of those things. It is strictly has to do with politics. And here in the United States, it's going to be the governor of your state. And when it comes to the military, my guess is it'll be the Department of the Navy, Department of the Army, Secretary of Defense. It's going to be at that level. So it's really, really at that political level where this decision has to be made. And it has to do because these are regulated monopolies, and they're not going to do anything on their own unless the government requires them or asks them to do it. And that's as simple as I can answer it.
So interesting. So you brought up the military base piece. So I'm interested in your perspective on how is a military base going to take advantage of this shift, sometime in the future where stored hydrogen is available. I know you talked about the importance of moving electrons and not fuel, but I wouldn't see a scenario where a military base would have a hydrogen well necessarily on base, but maybe a turbine or fueling station or something else that could take advantage of the hydrogen. What's your vision of how military base could
well let me give you some examples. Some places I already know they already have the wells. For example, Fort Hood, Texas, the heart of Texas. I know they got oil and gas wells out there because I've driven out there in those ranges and I know where they're at because I've seen them. Okay. If you're talking about the Crane Naval Surface Warfare Center in southern Indiana, there are depleted wells on the base. Camp Atterbury, there are depleted wells on the base. Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, there are depleted wells on the base. I'm trying to think what else. If I go back and I look at the Department of Natural Resources and even the Department of Energy, I have a grid modeling tool, and I can show you where there's all these military bases throughout the continental United States where you already have depleted oil and gas wells already on your bases. And they're just, when a well runs dry, what they do is they go out there, they pump it full of concrete, they dig down about 6 feet, they cut the pipe off, and they cover it with dirt. So, but if you go out there and you look through the Department of Natural Resources, like for example, I go through the state of Indiana or even the Department of Energy, there's a well out there, and you just don't know it's there. So it's just a matter of re-drilling. Now, it'd be nice to say, okay, I've got a gas turbine right there in my base, or gas turbine, but you're going to have to figure out how do I feed that thing. Either you're going to tap into the existing natural gas grid. If you're going to use hydrogen, well, you're going to have to store that gas somewhere. And considering the mass quantities of gas that you're going to need, the most economical way of storing that much gas is going to be in one of those depleted wells. And when you go back to the natural gas guys and ask them, okay, I got this gas grid hookup, where are you storing this gas? And they're going to tell you, we're storing it in some natural gas well out there someplace. Right. So if you look at the cost of putting in all that pipe and so forth, right, versus I can put that thing right there, I've got that well right on my base, versus how much hydrogen pipe you'd have to put in, it makes a lot more economical sense just to use one of those depleted wells that are probably already located right on your base.
Interesting. I noticed you didn't have hydrogen fuel cells on your map of kind of the use. Is there a reason you didn't show that, or just kind of talk about what you see are the differences for power generation, I guess, between the turbine and
it's not my business. I mean, if you wanted to do the service, like for one of the things, I'm not in the business. I don't make GE gas turbines. I don't drill the wells. I actually have service companies that do well services that do that for me. When it comes to the electrolyzer devices, I don't build those either. I get those from Millennium Rain Energy, and they make those grid scale electrolyzers. But Millennium Rain Energy, they also build those service stations. So if somebody wants to put in a service station, that would be Millennium Rain Energy. They actually build this. You buy their service stations from them now if you wanted to. They actually have a product you can use to refill your car or whatever that equipment is. So I'm just not in that business. I'm in the business of providing industrial scale quantities of hydrogen gas. And that's what we're certified and licensed for, is industrial gases. So we're just not in that business, is what I'm trying to tell
you. But your system, as you kind of described, a fuel cell could take advantage of that stored hydrogen in your scheme.
Yeah, you would have to have one of those service terminals like I showed there in the graphic. Like I said, I'm using Millennium Rain Energy's electrolyzers anyway. I would just get a hold of those guys and said, hey, you guys need a service station. I'd have Chris McWhitney, Millennium Rain Energy, put in your service station because he has all the licenses and certifications. For retail or an end use like you're going to refill like cars and trucks and stuff like that, you actually have to have a license to do that. Chris has all of those. I don't. Like I said, I'm licensed for industrial quantities of hydrogen gas. That's what my licenses are for.
One more question. So I'm interested in your perspective on, there's a lot of talk about electric vehicles and, a lot of push from the administration and, just kind of talk in general with the auto manufacturers and whatnot about building the electric vehicle infrastructure. Is your vision of the future that vehicles would take advantage of stored hydrogen vice electric vehicles, or are EVs, a bridge technology to getting to hydrogen as a transportation fuel?
Well, okay, so you asked a wonderful question, and I'm gonna answer it, and it's going to be in a way that a lot of people are going to find a little unpleasant. Okay, because I'm going to tell you the truth. Here's the truth. So when you start having, especially charging stations out on those freeways, and especially when you're coming around some of the summer months, especially like in August, we have a lot of load on the power grid, and a lot of people are using air conditioning. Now, there's energy consumption out there, what we call critical or mission critical type energy consumption. One has to do with air conditioning, and some people have to have air conditioning because that can be a life-threatening situation for them. And the other one has to do with some of our industrial customers. Probably one of the good examples would be aluminum. We have to provide power to aluminum electrolytic cells 24/7 by 365. Because if we don't, and the aluminum solidifies in those electrolytic cells, there's no way to remelt the aluminum. So we're liable, the utility business, we're liable for having to jackhammer, take out the building, rebuild it, because there's no way to remelt the aluminum inside those cells. Now, what am I saying? So that means I got to shed load. Well, I hate to tell you this, but the lowest thing in my totem pole is going to be your charging stations. So you can have a situation, you're in your Tesla, out there on a freeway trying to charge your car, and because we've got to curtail power, I'm going to shut your charging station down, and you may get stuck out there. Now, there is a way of fixing this, and that is simply this, and that is either I've got dispatchable generation using one of these little parks, or somehow we put in a utility pipe and pipe hydrogen over to a megawatt scale electrolyzer, hydrogen fuel cell, to provide auxiliary power to that charging station to help charge your car. But I already know we're going to have a rolling blackout, a grid stability problem as we roll on, as we replace a lot of these coal-fired power plants with more renewables, with more wind, more solar, more nuclear power, right? More gas turbines. This problem is going to continue to have a problem. And when you consider how much energy we're already being wasted curtailing wind, we're throwing away huge amounts of energy we're not taking advantage of now. We need to be taking advantage of it. But when we start electrifying the cars, this problem is going to become more and more acute. So I hate to say it this way, it's not a question of if, it's really a question of when. Now, I know there's some folks out there that keep talking about, well, Dan, we just need to build enough battery storage. Okay. Well, I just showed you this fact that the state of Indiana curtails 7 terawatts of wind every year. I hate to tell you this. You're never building a battery farm that big. You're never building a battery farm that will store 7 terawatts of power. And especially when you're talking about being able to generate 1.6 gigawatts worth of power for 160 days. You're never going to be able to build a battery farm that big. And that's just the physics of building that kind of battery farm. And I'm not going to go into that talk, because that's not my business. But when I talk to some of the engineers that are involved in building batteries, right, it's a nightmare scenario. So I hope that answers that question.
Well, great. I think this is a really fascinating conversation. I have tons more questions. We're about 15 minutes over, so, and I don't know if anybody's still listening in, but I'm going to end it there and thank Dan for your time and for your informative discussion. I don't know if Jim was able to join as well, but Jim, thank you for for your involvement in SAME and bringing this group to the webinar series. So thanks everybody, and we'll see you next month.
Thank you.